The dusty wagon lurched over another rut in the road, and Beatrice Vincent braced herself against the wooden seat, her fingers gripping the weathered planks until her knuckles turned white as she watched her entire world slip away behind her in a cloud of Arizona dust. At 28, she had already buried a husband, lost 2 pregnancies, and now found herself traveling west to Naco, Arizona territory, to live with her younger brother who had written her exactly once in 3 years. The letter had been brief, almost perfunctory, but it was the only lifeline she had after the bank foreclosed on her small Illinois farm. That had been in the spring of 1882, and now here she was in late autumn, bouncing along in a freight wagon with strangers, her few possessions wrapped in canvas behind her, wondering if this was all life had left to offer. The other women in the wagon talked excitedly about fresh starts and new opportunities, but Beatrice stayed quiet. She had learned that hope was a dangerous thing, something that made the disappointments cut deeper when they inevitably came. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 4 years now, killed in a factory accident that left her with nothing but debts and broken dreams. The 2 babies she had lost afterward, one at 3 months and another at 5, had finally convinced her that perhaps she was meant to walk through life alone. The wagon driver called out that they would be stopping in Bisbee for the night before making the final push to Naco the next day. Beatrice felt nothing at the announcement, just the same hollow numbness that had accompanied her for months now. She slept fitfully in a boarding house that smelled of tobacco and boiled cabbage, sharing a room with 2 other women who snored and talked in their sleep. When dawn broke gray and uncertain over the desert landscape, she was already awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering what her brother Daniel would say when he saw her. Would he resent having to take her in? Would his wife, whoever she was now, look at her with pity or contempt? The road from Bisbee to Naco was rougher than what they had traveled before, cutting through scrubland and rocky hills that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. Beatrice found herself mesmerized by the stark beauty of it all, so different from the green fields of Illinois. Here, everything seemed hard and unforgiving, as if the land itself had no patience for weakness. They were perhaps 2 hours out from Naco when one of the wagon wheels hit something that made a sound like a gunshot. The entire wagon lurched violently to the right, and Beatrice felt herself being thrown from the seat. She hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs and sending pain shooting through her left ankle. Someone screamed, and she realized distantly that it might have been her. When the dust settled and she could breathe again, Beatrice found herself lying at the side of the road, her skirts twisted around her legs and her ankle throbbing with a pain that made her stomach turn. The wagon driver was cursing steadily as he examined the broken wheel, and the other passengers were scattered around, picking themselves up and checking for injuries. "Can you stand, miss?" The driver, a grizzled man named Porter, offered her a hand. Beatrice tried, but the moment she put weight on her left foot, white-hot agony shot up her leg and she would have fallen if Porter had not caught her. "I think it is broken," she managed through gritted teeth. "Well, that is just fine," Porter said, and she could hear the frustration in his voice. "Wheel is busted too. I am going to have to ride back to Bisbee for parts. Might take most of the day." "You cannot just leave us here," one of the other women protested. "I am not asking for your permission, madam. You can wait here or you can walk, but I need that wheel fixed if any of us are going anywhere." Porter's tone left no room for argument. Beatrice closed her eyes against the pain and the despair that threatened to overwhelm her. Of course, this would happen. Of course, even this simple journey would go wrong. It seemed to be the pattern of her life lately. "Someone is coming," one of the men said, pointing down the road. Beatrice opened her eyes to see a figure on horseback approaching from the direction they had been heading. As the rider drew closer, she could make out more details. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and tall, sitting his horse with the easy confidence of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. He wore buckskin clothing that had seen hard use, and a wide-brimmed hat shaded his face from the relentless sun. The man pulled his horse to a stop a few yards from the disabled wagon and dismounted in one fluid motion. When he pushed his hat back, Beatrice found herself looking at a face that was weathered and tanned, with deep-set eyes the color of a storm-gray sky and a dark beard that covered his jaw. He looked to be in his early 30s, and there was something solid and dependable about him, like one of the great rock formations they had been passing. "Looks like you folks have run into some trouble," he said, his voice deep and measured. "Wheels broken," Porter said shortly. "I was about to ride back to Bisbee for parts." The stranger walked around the wagon, examining the damage with a practiced eye. "That is going to take time you do not have. Sun will be setting in a few hours, and you do not want to be out here after dark, not with all these people." "You have a better suggestion?" Porter asked, defensive. "My place is about 3 miles northeast of here, up in the hills. You could bring your passengers there for the night, take the wagon to Bisbee empty, and come back with the wheel fixed tomorrow. I have got room enough, and your people would be more comfortable than camping out here." Porter looked suspicious. "Why would you do that?" The stranger shrugged. "Because it is the right thing to do, but suit yourself if you would rather leave these ladies sitting in the dirt all night." Beatrice had been silent during this exchange, trying to control the waves of pain radiating from her ankle, but something about the stranger's calm competence made her speak up. "I cannot walk," she said. "I think my ankle is broken." The gray eyes turned to her, and she saw them sharpen with concern. The stranger crossed to where she sat and knelt down beside her without asking permission. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her injured foot. She nodded, not trusting her voice. His hands were gentle as he carefully examined her ankle through the leather of her boot, but even that light touch made her gasp. "It is badly sprained at the least," he said. "You need to get that boot off before the swelling gets worse, and you need cold water and rest." "Well," Porter demanded, "what is it going to be? I cannot carry all these people on one horse." The stranger stood up, and Beatrice noticed that he was even taller than she had first thought, probably 6 feet and several inches. "I will take the lady with the injured ankle to my place. You can bring the others if you want, or you can all camp here. That is your choice." "Now wait just a minute," one of the other passengers said. "We do not know you from Adam. How do we know you are not some kind of bandit or worse?" "You do not," the stranger said evenly. "But your other choice is to sit here and hope nothing comes along looking for easy prey. I am offering shelter and help. You can take it or leave it." Porter scratched his beard thoughtfully. "What is your name, Mr. Isaac Jennings? I've got a cabin up in the hills where I trap and hunt. I come down to Bisbee and Naco about once a month for supplies. Check with the general store in Naco if you want references. They know me." Something about the way he spoke, the simple directness of it, convinced Beatrice that he was telling the truth. Maybe it was the pain making her reckless, or maybe it was just that she was too tired to care anymore, but she heard herself say, "I will go with him." Isaac looked at her with what might have been approval in his eyes. "Can you ride a horse if I help you up? I can try. That is good enough." He turned to Porter. "You bring the others to my place or not, that is your business, but I am taking this lady there now before that ankle swells up any more." Porter seemed to make a decision. "All right, give me directions to your cabin. I will get these folks settled there and then head to Bisbee. Should be back by tomorrow afternoon." Isaac gave clear, precise directions, making Porter repeat them back to ensure he had them right. Then he turned back to Beatrice. "This is going to hurt," he warned her. "But I will be as careful as I can." He lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, and despite his warning, she could not hold back a cry when the movement jostled her ankle. "I am sorry," he said, and she believed that he meant it. He carried her to his horse, a big roan gelding that stood steady as a rock, and somehow managed to get her settled in the saddle. Then he swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to take the reins. "Hold on to the saddle horn," he instructed. "I will go slow, but it is still going to be rough." Beatrice did as he said, intensely aware of the solid warmth of him at her back and the strange intimacy of their position. When had she last been this close to a man? For years, at least. The thought made something twist in her chest, a feeling she could not quite name. Isaac kept his word about going slow, guiding the horse with a steady hand over the rough terrain. Despite his care, every step sent jolts of pain through her ankle, and she had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. She felt him shift behind her, adjusting his position so that he took more of her weight, supporting her more fully against his chest. "Tell me your name," he said after a while, and she realized he was trying to distract her from the pain. "Beatrice Vincent. I was traveling to Naco to stay with my brother." "Vincent. Is your brother Daniel Vincent?" She twisted to look at him, surprised. "You know him?" "Met him a few times in town. He runs the freight office, if I remember right, married to a woman named Margaret." I did not know he had married. The words came out more bitter than she intended. "You are not close then." "We were once, before I married and moved away. Things changed after that." She did not elaborate, and Isaac did not press. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the steady clop of the horse's hooves and the rustle of wind through the sparse brush. Beatrice found herself relaxing despite the pain, lulled by the rhythm of the horse's gait and the unexpected comfort of Isaac's presence. "How long have you lived out here?" she asked eventually. "About 5 years. Came out from Montana after spending some time in the mountains up there. Liked the trapping and hunting, did not like the winters." "Is it very lonely?" He was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes. But I got used to my own company a long time ago. Most people find me too rough around the edges for civilized society anyway." Beatrice thought about her own isolation over the past few years, the way she had pulled away from everyone after losing the babies, how even her neighbors back in Illinois had eventually stopped trying to include her in their gatherings. "I understand that," she said softly. The cabin appeared as they crested a small rise, and Beatrice felt genuine surprise at what she saw. She had been expecting something rough and primitive, but while Isaac's home was certainly simple, it was also well built and carefully maintained. The log structure sat in a natural clearing, with a small stream running nearby and a corral that held 2 more horses and a mule. There was a lean-to shelter for wood storage, a small garden plot that looked like it had been productive earlier in the season, and even a chicken coop from which she could hear faint clucking sounds. "You have built a real home here," she said, unable to keep the admiration from her voice. "A man needs a solid roof and walls that keep out the wind," Isaac said as he guided the horse up to the cabin. "No point in doing something halfway." He dismounted first and then helped her down, lifting her again with that same easy strength. This time she was ready for the pain and managed not to cry out. He carried her inside and set her carefully on a chair near the stone fireplace. The interior of the cabin was as well maintained as the exterior, surprisingly clean and organized for a bachelor's home. There was a large bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, shelves that held supplies and equipment, and various furs hanging on the walls. A cooking area occupied one end of the room, and she could see that he had real glass windows, not just shutters. "Let me get that boot off before the swelling makes it impossible," Isaac said, kneeling in front of her again. "This is going to hurt worse than anything so far." He was right. Despite his gentleness and her attempts to brace herself, the pain of removing the boot made her vision go gray around the edges. She found herself gripping his shoulder, her fingers digging into the solid muscle there as she fought not to faint. "Breathe," he told her. "Just breathe through it." When the boot finally came free, she could see that her ankle was already swelling, the skin turning an ugly purple color. Isaac examined it carefully, his fingers probing with surprising delicacy for such a large man. "Not broken," he said finally, "but a bad sprain. You are not going to be walking on this for a while." He stood and went to the door, taking up a bucket. "I am going to get cold water from the stream. You sit there and do not move. I will be right back." Alone in the cabin, Beatrice let herself sag against the chair back, exhausted from the pain and the strange events of the day. She should probably be frightened, alone in an isolated cabin with a man she did not know, but she found she was not. There was something about Isaac Jennings that inspired trust, a quiet competence and straightforward honesty that seemed as solid as the mountains themselves. He returned quickly with the bucket of cold water and a clean cloth. "This will help with the swelling," he said, soaking the cloth and wrapping it around her ankle. The cold was shocking at first, but then the numbing effect began to ease the pain and she sighed with relief. "Thank you," she said. "I know this is an imposition. It is nothing. I could not leave you sitting by the side of the road." He refreshed the cold compress, his movements practiced. "You have done this before," she observed, "treated injuries. Plenty of times. You do not live alone in the wilderness without learning to take care of yourself. Broken bones, cuts, burns, fever, I have dealt with them all. But never for someone else." He glanced up at her, and she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. "Not often. Most people do not come out this way." The sound of horses approaching made them both turn toward the door. Isaac stood and looked out the window. "Your wagon party," he said. "Looks like they decided to take me up on the offer after all." Over the next hour, the cabin and the area around it became considerably more crowded. Porter had brought all the passengers, 6 in total besides Beatrice, and they set about making themselves as comfortable as possible. The women would sleep in the cabin, Isaac announced, and he and the men would bed down in the lean-to. "You cannot give up your own bed," one of the women protested. "I have slept in worse places," Isaac said with a shrug. "The cabin is warmer and more secure. You ladies take it." Porter left for Bisbee as the sun was beginning to set, promising to return the next day with the repaired wheel. Isaac set about preparing a meal for his unexpected guests, and Beatrice watched in fascination as he moved around the cooking area with easy efficiency. He made a stew from dried meat and vegetables, along with cornbread that he baked in a Dutch oven set in the coals of the fireplace. "This is delicious," one of the other women said when they ate, and the others murmured agreement. Isaac just nodded, accepting the compliment without comment. Beatrice noticed that he seemed uncomfortable with the attention, more at ease when he could stay on the edges of the group. As the evening wore on and the other passengers settled in for the night, Beatrice found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. Her ankle throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, and her mind would not quiet. She lay on Isaac's bed, which he had insisted she take while the other women made pallets on the floor and stared at the ceiling. The door opened quietly, and Isaac's silhouette appeared against the moonlit night outside. "Cannot sleep?" he asked softly. "The pain," she admitted. He came to the bedside and checked the compress on her ankle, replacing it with a fresh one he had apparently kept cooling in the stream. "I have some willow bark tea that might help if you want it." "Yes, please." He prepared the tea over the banked coals of the fire, moving so quietly that none of the other sleeping women stirred. When he brought it to her, steam rising from the tin cup, their fingers touched briefly as she took it from him. "Why do you live out here alone?" she asked as she sipped the bitter tea. It was a bold question, maybe too personal, but the darkness and the quiet seemed to make such things permissible. Isaac settled into the chair beside the bed, his face half in shadow. "I found that I did not fit too well in towns," he said after a moment. "Too many people, too much noise, too many expectations about how a man should be. Out here I can just be myself." "Were you always alone?" "No," the word was quiet. "I had a wife once back in Montana, Sarah. She died of fever the first winter we were married. That was 10 years ago. After that, I just kept moving, kept to myself mostly. Seemed easier that way." Beatrice felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "I lost my husband too," she said, "and 2 babies. I am sorry." The words were simple, but she could hear the genuine sympathy in them. "For a long time, I thought it meant there was something wrong with me, that I was being punished for something. I stopped letting myself hope for anything better." She did not know why she was telling him this, a stranger she had met only hours ago. Maybe it was because he had shared his own loss, or maybe it was because she sensed he would understand. "That is no way to live," Isaac said gently. "I know. I tried it myself for years, but just because we have lost does not mean we have to stay lost." His words hit her with unexpected force, and she felt tears prick at her eyes. "I do not know if I remember how to be any other way." "Then maybe it is time to learn again." He stood and adjusted the blanket over her. "Try to sleep now. The willow bark should help." She did sleep, finally, and when she woke, it was to the sound of activity outside and the smell of coffee brewing. Pale morning light filtered through the windows, and the other women were already up and moving about. Isaac appeared in the doorway, clean-shaven now, and she realized with a small shock how handsome he actually was. His jaw was strong and square, his mouth generous, and those gray eyes seemed even more striking now that she could see them clearly. "How is the ankle?" he asked. She flexed it experimentally and winced. "Still sore, but better." "Good. Keep it elevated today and keep using the cold water. You should be able to put some weight on it in a few days if you are careful." He brought her coffee and a plate of fried eggs and the leftover cornbread. "Porter should be back this afternoon. You will probably be able to continue to Naco tomorrow if you are up for it." The thought of leaving, of continuing on to her brother's house, and the uncertain welcome that awaited her there, filled Beatrice with unexpected reluctance. She told herself it was just because she was injured and Isaac's cabin felt safe, but she knew it was more than that. For the first time in years, she felt something stirring inside her, some small ember of feeling that she had thought long dead. The day passed slowly. The other passengers grew restless, eager to continue their journey, but Beatrice found herself content to sit and watch as Isaac went about his daily tasks. He checked on his animals, split wood, and cleaned some traps he had apparently been working on before encountering them on the road. He moved with a quiet economy of motion, never wasting energy, every action purposeful. In the afternoon, one of the other women, a young blonde named Sally who was traveling to Naco to meet her fiancé, came and sat with Beatrice. "He is quite something, is he not?" she said, watching Isaac through the window. "Who?" Beatrice asked, though she knew perfectly well who Sally meant. "Mr. Jennings. So strong and capable, like something out of a storybook. Do you suppose he is truly happy living out here all alone?" "I think he is content," Beatrice said carefully. "It seems such a waste, though, A man like that should have a wife and family. Sally sighed dramatically. If I was not already engaged, I might set my cap at him myself. Beatrice felt an unexpected flash of something that might have been jealousy, which was ridiculous. She had known Isaac for less than a day. She had no claim on him, no right to feel possessive. And yet the thought of him with someone like Sally, someone young and pretty and full of hope, made her chest tighten. Porter arrived in the late afternoon as promised, the wagon wheel repaired and ready to go. The passengers gathered their things, eager to be on their way. Isaac helped load everything back onto the wagon, lifting the heavy trunks as if they weighed nothing. When it came time to help Beatrice to the wagon, Isaac lifted her again, but this time she found herself reluctant to let go when he set her on the seat. Their eyes met, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. "You take care of that ankle," he said. "Do not try to do too much too soon." "I will not. Thank you for everything, Isaac. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along." "You would have managed. You seem like the kind of woman who always does." The wagon lurched into motion, and Beatrice watched over her shoulder as Isaac's cabin grew smaller in the distance. He stood there watching them go, a solitary figure against the vast landscape, and she felt something twist painfully in her chest. Naco turned out to be a small but bustling town, built up around the mining operations that dominated the area. The wagon dropped Beatrice at the freight office, where her brother Daniel worked. She had not seen him in almost 6 years, and she was shocked at how much he had aged. His hair was thinning, his face lined with stress, and there was a hardness around his eyes that had not been there before. "Beatrice," he said when she hobbled in on the makeshift crutch one of the other passengers had fashioned for her. "You are finally here." Not exactly a warm welcome, but she had not expected one. "I am sorry to be a burden, Daniel." "Well, you are here now. Margaret is waiting at the house." "Can you walk?" "With the crutch, yes." The house turned out to be a small adobe structure on the edge of town. Margaret Vincent was a thin, pinched woman with suspicious eyes and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. She looked Beatrice up and down with obvious disapproval. "So you are the sister," she said. "Daniel said you would be coming. I have made up a corner in the spare room for you. You will be expected to help with the housework, of course. I cannot be expected to take care of everything myself, and Daniel says you have no money to contribute otherwise." Beatrice felt her heart sink. This was going to be even worse than she had feared. "Of course, I will help however I can once my ankle heals." "What happened to your ankle?" "The wagon had an accident. I sprained it." Margaret made a disapproving noise. "Just our luck. First you show up with nothing, and now you are injured and useless on top of it." "Margaret," Daniel said, but there was no real force behind the reprimand. That first night in her brother's house, Beatrice lay on a thin mattress in a cramped room that smelled of mildew, and listened to Daniel and Margaret arguing in harsh whispers in the next room. She caught enough of it to understand that Margaret had not wanted her to come, that Daniel had only agreed to take her in out of a sense of obligation he clearly resented. She thought of Isaac's cabin, of the clean simplicity of it and the quiet peace. She thought of the way he had looked at her when they said goodbye, and she wondered what would have happened if she had asked to stay. The next weeks were difficult. Her ankle healed slowly, and Margaret found ways to make her feel unwelcome even as she insisted Beatrice earn her keep. Daniel avoided her as much as possible, clearly uncomfortable with the tension in his own house. Beatrice helped with cooking and cleaning, kept her head down, and tried to take up as little space as possible. She made trips into town when she could, buying necessary items with the small amount of money she had managed to save from selling her few possessions back in Illinois. The general store was run by a friendly man named Hank, who seemed to know everyone in town. It was on one of these trips, about 3 weeks after her arrival, that she heard Isaac's name mentioned. Jennings was in yesterday, Hank was telling another customer. Needed supplies. Said he had taken in some stranded travelers a while back. Beatrice's heart jumped. Isaac Jennings, she asked before she could stop herself. Hank turned to her with a smile. You know Isaac, fine man. Keeps to himself mostly, but honest as the day is long. Been trading with him for years now. He helped me when our wagon broke down. I was one of those travelers he mentioned. Well, there you go. That is Isaac for you, always helping folks when they need it. Does not ask for anything in return either, which is rare in these parts. Does he come to town often? About once a month or so, whenever he needs to trade furs or get supplies. Should be back again in another week or two, I would expect. Beatrice found herself counting the days, though she tried not to. She had no reason to think Isaac would want to see her again, no reason to believe that brief encounter had meant anything to him. He had been helping a stranger in need, nothing more. The fact that she could not stop thinking about him, that she found herself comparing every man she saw to his quiet strength and gentle hands, was her problem, not his. Margaret grew more demanding as Beatrice's ankle healed, finding fault with everything she did. The house was never clean enough, the meals never quite right, Beatrice's presence never quite acceptable. Daniel remained silent through all of it, and Beatrice realized with a sinking heart that her brother had become a weak man, dominated by his wife and too worn down to stand up for anyone, even his own sister. She began to wonder if she should leave, try to find work somewhere and make her own way. But with winter coming on and her resources nearly exhausted, she did not know where she would go or what she would do. She felt trapped, just as trapped as she had been back in Illinois, maybe more so. It was a cold afternoon in early December when she was walking back from the general store and saw a familiar figure leading a horse down the main street. Her heart seemed to stop and then start again at double speed. Isaac. He was dressed in heavy buckskin against the cold, his hat pulled low, but she would have known him anywhere. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and their eyes met across the distance. She saw recognition and something else, something warm and alive, flash across his face. He changed direction, leading his horse toward her, and she stood frozen, unable to move or speak. "Beatrice," he said when he reached her, and the sound of her name in his deep voice made something flutter in her chest. "I was hoping I might run into you. You were. How is your ankle?" "Much better. Completely healed now, actually." "Good." He looked at her for a long moment, and she had the sense that he was taking in more than just her physical condition. "How are you settling in with your brother?" She should have said she was fine, should have maintained the polite fiction that everything was well. But something about the concern in his eyes made her tell the truth. "Not as well as I had hoped." His jaw tightened. "Is he mistreating you?" "No, nothing like that. It is just awkward. His wife did not want me there, and I feel like an intruder in their home." Isaac was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes searching her face. "I have been thinking about you," he said finally, and the admission seemed to cost him something. "Wondering if you were all right, if you were happy." "I have been thinking about you too," she admitted, her heart pounding. "Have you?" Something in his voice made her look up, and she saw hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. Before she could answer, a sharp voice cut through the moment. "Beatrice, what are you doing standing about in the cold? I sent you for flour an hour ago." Margaret had appeared on the street, her face pinched with irritation. She looked between Beatrice and Isaac with suspicious eyes. "Who is this?" "This is Isaac Jennings," Beatrice said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "He helped me when the wagon broke down. Isaac, this is Margaret Vincent, my brother's wife." "Madam," Isaac said with a polite nod. Margaret did not acknowledge the greeting. "Come along, Beatrice. I need that flour for supper." She turned and marched back toward the house, clearly expecting Beatrice to follow. "I should go," Beatrice said reluctantly. "Wait." Isaac's hand moved as if to reach for her, then fell back to his side. "I am staying in town tonight at the boarding house. Could I call on you tomorrow, properly I mean, ask your brother's permission and such?" Her breath caught. "You want to call on me?" "I do. If you would like that." "I would," she said, barely above a whisper. "I would like that very much." His face transformed with a smile that made him look years younger. "Tomorrow, then. I will come by in the afternoon if that suits you." "Beatrice?" Margaret's voice, sharp with impatience. "Tomorrow," Beatrice agreed, and then forced herself to walk away, though every step felt like a physical effort. That night she lay awake, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. Isaac wanted to call on her, to court her presumably. After years of believing love was behind her, that she would spend the rest of her life alone, here was this unexpected possibility. But what if it led to more heartbreak? What if she let herself hope again and was disappointed? She had barely survived the losses she had already endured. Could she risk going through that again? The next afternoon she dressed in her best dress, which was not saying much. It was a simple gray wool that had seen better days, but she had mended it carefully and it was clean and modest. Margaret watched her preparations with narrowed eyes. "What are you getting yourself up for?" she demanded. "A gentleman is coming to call." "What gentleman?" "The one I introduced you to yesterday. Isaac Jennings." Margaret's mouth thinned. "That mountain man, Beatrice, have you lost your senses? You cannot seriously be considering encouraging his attentions." "Why not?" "Because he is completely unsuitable, that is why. He lives in a cabin in the wilderness like some kind of savage. What kind of life is that for a woman?" "Perhaps the kind of life I want," Beatrice said, surprised by her own boldness. Daniel came in from the freight office just as Isaac arrived. Her brother looked Isaac up and down with clear skepticism when Beatrice made the introductions. "Mr. Jennings has asked permission to call on me," Beatrice said. "I wanted you to know, Daniel, since I am living in your house." "Is that so?" Daniel crossed his arms. "What are your intentions toward my sister, Mr. Jennings?" "Honorable ones," Isaac said steadily. "I would like to get to know her better, with your permission." "She has been widowed and has no prospects," Daniel said bluntly. "If you are looking for entertainment, you had better look elsewhere." Beatrice felt her face flame with embarrassment, but Isaac's expression did not change. "I am not looking for entertainment. I am looking for companionship, possibly more if things work out between us. I am a man of modest means, but I own my land and cabin free and clear, and I make enough from trapping and hunting to live comfortably. I can provide for a wife if it comes to that." The directness of it took Beatrice's breath away. He was not playing games or making pretty speeches. He was laying out plain facts like a man presenting a business proposition. Daniel seemed somewhat mollified by this approach. "Very well. You may call on her, but I expect you to behave respectably. She will stay in this house, under my roof, until there is a proper engagement if things progress that far." "Understood," Isaac said. They sat in the small, cramped parlor, Margaret hovering nearby with obvious disapproval. Isaac seemed out of place in the confined space, his large frame making the furniture look small. But if he was uncomfortable, he did not show it. "Tell me about your life before you came here," he said to Beatrice. She told him about growing up in Illinois, about marrying Thomas when she was 20, about the farm they had tried to build together. She told him about the accident that killed her husband, about the pregnancy she had lost, about the slow slide into debt and despair that had finally ended with her journey west. Isaac listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he reached out and took her hand, a simple gesture that made Margaret gasp with shock at the impropriety. "You have been through a lot," he said quietly, "but you are still here. That takes strength. Sometimes I do not feel very strong." Strength is not about never feeling weak. It is about keeping going even when you do. They talked until the early winter darkness began to fall and Isaac rose to leave. "May I come back tomorrow?" he asked. "Please," she said. He came back the next day and the day after that. Each visit, they talked more, sharing pieces of themselves with a growing ease that felt both natural and precious. Isaac told her about his childhood in Ohio, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 16, about drifting west and eventually finding his way to the mountains of Montana. "Sarah was a preacher's daughter," he said when he spoke of his late wife. "Sweet and gentle, but not really suited for frontier life. She tried hard, but the isolation wore on her. When the fever came, she did not have much fight left in her. After she died, I felt like I had failed her, like I should have known better than to bring her to such a hard place." "You cannot blame yourself for getting sick," Beatrice said. "I know that in my head, but my heart took longer to accept it. For years, I thought maybe I was meant to be alone, that I had had my chance at love and lost it. And now," he looked at her with those steady gray eyes, "now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe we get more than one chance if we are brave enough to take it." It was only his fourth visit, but Beatrice felt like she had known him much longer. There was an ease between them, a comfort that she had never felt with anyone else, not even Thomas. With Isaac, she did not have to pretend to be stronger or more hopeful than she felt. He seemed to accept all of her, the broken parts and the scared parts along with whatever good remained. "I want to show you something," Isaac said on his fifth visit. "Would you be willing to take a ride with me tomorrow? I will have you back by dark, I promise." Margaret immediately protested. "It is completely inappropriate for an unmarried woman to go riding alone with a man." "Then, perhaps Daniel could come along as a chaperone," Isaac suggested smoothly. Daniel had no desire to spend a day playing chaperone, and after some negotiation, it was agreed that Beatrice could go if she took one of the neighbor women along. Mrs. Patterson, a widow who lived next door, agreed to accompany them in exchange for a small payment from Isaac. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Isaac arrived with 3 horses, including a gentle mare for Beatrice. Mrs. Patterson, a cheerful woman in her 50s, chattered happily as they rode out of town, but after a while she fell silent, seeming to sense that the younger pair wanted some privacy. Isaac led them northeast, into the hills, and Beatrice realized with a leap of her heart that he was taking her to his cabin. The ride took about 2 hours, and when they arrived, everything was just as she remembered it. The cabin sat peacefully in its clearing, smoke rising from the chimney. "You have kept a fire going," she observed. "I have been staying here the past few nights instead of in town," he admitted. Seemed more welcoming than the boarding house. He helped her dismount and led her inside. Someone, clearly Isaac himself, had made an effort to make the place even tidier than before. There were fresh flowers in a jar on the table, wildflowers that must have been hard to find in early December. The gesture touched her more than she could say. "Mrs. Patterson made herself comfortable near the fire with some knitting she had brought along, giving them the illusion of privacy while still maintaining propriety. "Why did you bring me here?" Beatrice asked. Isaac stood by the window, looking out at the mountains. "Because I wanted you to see it again, now that you are not hurt and scared. I wanted you to see what life here could be like." "Why does that matter?" He turned to face her, and she saw vulnerability in his eyes that she had not seen before. Because I am going to ask you something, and I want you to know what you would be saying yes to if you agree." Her heart began to pound. "What are you going to ask me?" "Beatrice, I know we have not known each other long, only a few weeks, really. But I feel like I know you better than I have ever known anyone. When I am with you, I feel like myself in a way I have not felt in years. You understand what it is like to lose things, to hurt, to wonder if you will ever feel whole again. But you are still here, still willing to try, and that gives me courage to try too." He crossed to her and took both her hands in his. "I am not a rich man, and I cannot offer you an easy life, but I can offer you a partnership, a real one, where we face things together. I can offer you honesty and loyalty and a home that will always be yours as much as mine. I can offer you my heart if you want it." Tears were streaming down Beatrice's face now, but she made no move to wipe them away. "Isaac, marry me, Beatrice. Come live here with me. Let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy." She should have been cautious, should have asked for more time, should have worried about all the practical concerns. But standing there in his cabin, looking into his honest, hopeful eyes, she knew her answer with a certainty that went bone deep. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." The joy that lit his face was worth every moment of pain and loneliness she had endured to get to this point. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break, and she buried her face against his chest and let herself cry, releasing years of grief and fear and letting hope rush in to fill the empty spaces. "I am not going to let you down," he promised, his voice rough with emotion. "I swear to you, Beatrice, I am going to spend every day trying to be worthy of this." "You already are," she whispered. Behind them, Mrs. Patterson sniffled loudly and dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief. "Well, that is the most romantic thing I have heard in 20 years, she declared. "You two are going to be very happy together, I can tell." The wedding took place a week later, on a crisp December morning in the small church in Naco. Daniel gave her away with visible relief, and Margaret did not bother to hide her satisfaction at having Beatrice out of her house. But Beatrice did not care. Her eyes were on Isaac, standing tall and solid at the front of the church, watching her walk toward him with such love in his eyes that it made her chest ache. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor each other through whatever came. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed her with gentle reverence, and Beatrice felt something settle into place inside her, like a piece of herself she had not known was missing had finally been found. The townspeople had organized a modest reception at the church hall, and to Beatrice's surprise, quite a few people came. Isaac, it turned out, was more well-liked than he seemed to realize. People spoke of times he had helped them, small kindnesses he had done without being asked. "Your husband is a good man," Hank from the general store told her. "You picked a fine one." "I know," Beatrice said, watching Isaac across the room. He was talking with some of the local ranchers, looking uncomfortable with all the attention but bearing it for her sake. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and smiled at her, and she felt warmth spread through her chest. They left the reception in the early afternoon, riding together toward the cabin that was now their home. Isaac had insisted on buying a proper side saddle for her mare, another example of the thoughtfulness that seemed to come naturally to him. When they arrived at the cabin, Isaac dismounted and came to help her down. But instead of setting her on her feet, he lifted her in his arms. "I believe there is a tradition about carrying brides over thresholds," he said. She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I believe you are right." He carried her inside and set her down gently. The cabin was warm, the fire burning bright in the hearth. He had made more preparations, she saw. Fresh linens on the bed, a new rug on the floor, even curtains on the windows. "Isaac, you did not have to do all this. I wanted to. I wanted our home to be welcoming for you. It is already perfect because you are here." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing over her cheekbones. "Are you happy? Happier than I ever thought I could be again." He kissed her then, not with the gentle restraint of the church, but with real passion, and she responded with equal fervor. There was no awkwardness between them, no uncertainty. It felt right and natural, like coming home. That night, as they lay together in the bed that was now theirs, Beatrice felt a peace she had not known since she was a child. Isaac held her close, his arms strong and warm around her, and she listened to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you scared?" he asked quietly. She knew what he meant. After the losses she had suffered, the babies she had not been able to carry to term, the possibility of trying again was daunting. "A little," she admitted, "but I am also hopeful, which is something I have not been in a long time. Whatever happens, we will face it together. And if we are not blessed with children, then we will still have each other. That is enough for me." "I love you," she said, and realized it was true. Somewhere in the past few weeks, without her quite noticing when it happened, she had fallen completely in love with this quiet, steady man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying. "I love you too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I did not think I would ever say those words to anyone again, but here you are, and I cannot imagine my life without you now." The winter that followed was hard in some ways, with heavy snows that sometimes kept them trapped in the cabin for days at a time. But Beatrice had never been happier. She and Isaac fell into an easy rhythm, working together to maintain their home and tend to the animals. He taught her to read animal tracks in the snow and how to set snares for rabbits. She taught him to make proper bread and how to mend clothes so they did not fall apart after one wearing. They talked for hours by the fire, sharing stories and dreams and comfortable silences. They made love with increasing confidence and tenderness, learning each other's bodies and hearts. And slowly, day by day, Beatrice felt herself healing from the wounds of her past. In late January, she realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week, afraid to hope, but when the second week passed with no sign of them, she told Isaac. His face went pale. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "We are going to be all right," he said, though she could hear the fear in his voice. "Whatever happens, we are going to be all right." The pregnancy progressed slowly through the winter and into spring. Beatrice felt sick most mornings, and there were days when she was so tired she could barely move. But Isaac was endlessly patient, taking over more of the chores and making sure she rested. "I feel useless," she complained one day in March. "You are growing our child," he said firmly. "That is the most important work there is." When she was 4 months along and starting to show, they made the trip to Naco to buy supplies and see the doctor. The doctor, an elderly man named Whitmore, examined her carefully. "Everything looks good," he said when he was finished. "You are healthy and the baby seems to be growing well. Just take it easy, get plenty of rest, and try not to worry too much." "I lost 2 before," Beatrice confessed. "Both in the early months." Dr. Whitmore nodded sympathetically. "I understand your fear, but you have made it further than either of those times and you are in good health. There is no reason to think this one will not go full term." On the way back to the cabin, Isaac held her hand. "How are you feeling? Scared? Hopeful? Both at once?" "That seems about right." As the months passed and Beatrice's belly grew round and full, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, this time, things would be different. She felt the baby move inside her, strong kicks that made her gasp and laugh. Isaac would place his large hand on her stomach and grin with wonder when he felt the movements. "He is going to be strong," Isaac predicted. "Or she," Beatrice reminded him. I do not care which, as long as you both come through healthy." In late September, when the aspens were turning gold on the mountainsides and the air had the first crisp edge of autumn, Beatrice's labor began. Isaac rode hard to Naco to fetch Dr. Whitmore and Mrs. Patterson, who had agreed to help with the birth. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. There were times when Beatrice thought she could not bear it anymore, when the pain seemed like it would break her, but Isaac stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. "You can do this," he told her over and over. "You are the strongest person I know. Just a little longer." Finally, in the late afternoon of the second day, their son entered the world with a strong cry that made Beatrice weep with relief and joy. He was perfect, with a full head of dark hair and Isaac's gray eyes. "He is beautiful," Isaac said, his voice breaking as he held his son for the first time. "Beatrice, he is perfect." They named him Thomas Isaac, honoring both of their pasts while looking toward their future. The baby was healthy and hungry, and Beatrice felt a fierce protective love that was almost overwhelming in its intensity. "I was so afraid," she confessed to Isaac later, when it was just the three of them in the quiet cabin. "So afraid that I would lose him like I lost the others." "But you did not. He is here and he is ours, and we are going to watch him grow up together." Isaac kissed her forehead gently. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving me a family again. We gave it to each other," she said. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small milestones. He was a good baby, healthy and growing fast. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, patient with the crying and willing to walk the floor at night when the baby would not settle. Beatrice watched him with their son and fell in love with him all over again. They made the journey to Naco periodically so Thomas could be seen by the doctor, and so they could visit with the few friends they had made. Daniel and Margaret had moved to California shortly after the wedding, and Beatrice felt only relief at their departure. Her real family was here with Isaac and Thomas. When Thomas was 18 months old, Beatrice realized she was pregnant again. This time there was less fear, though it was not entirely absent. She had carried one child to term successfully. Surely she could do it again. Their daughter was born in the spring, an easier birth than Thomas had been. She had Beatrice's brown hair and a serious expression that made her look wise beyond her infant years. They named her Sarah Grace, for Isaac's first wife and for the grace that had brought them together. "I think your Sarah would have liked that we named our daughter after her," Beatrice said as they sat together watching their two children. "I think she would have liked you," Isaac replied. "I think she would be glad I found someone to love again. I hope my Thomas would feel the same." They smiled at each other, the ghosts of their pasts acknowledged but no longer haunting them. Life settled into a rich fullness. The cabin rang with children's laughter and the chaos of family life. Isaac expanded the cabin, adding a second room for the children and making improvements to make life easier. They acquired more chickens, a few goats, and a cow. Beatrice planted a larger garden, growing vegetables and herbs. When Thomas was 5 and Sarah was 3, Beatrice became pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder, maybe because she was now in her mid-30s and chasing 2 active children. But she carried the baby to term, and in late summer, another son was born. They named him Daniel, after Beatrice's brother, a gesture of forgiveness and letting go of old hurts. 3 children seemed to complete their family. The cabin was full of noise and love, and Beatrice sometimes had to stop and remind herself that this was really her life, that she had truly been given this second chance at happiness. She thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived in Arizona territory, broken and hopeless, convinced that love had passed her by. How wrong she had been. Love had not passed her by at all. It had just been waiting for her to be ready, waiting for the right person to show her what it could really be. Isaac, for his part, seemed to grow more content with each passing year. He still trapped and hunted, but he spent more time at home now, teaching Thomas how to track and fish, playing with Sarah, rocking baby Daniel. He was a man who had found his purpose, and it showed in everything he did. The years passed, marked by small events and quiet joys. Thomas grew tall and strong like his father, serious and capable beyond his years. Sarah proved to be bright and curious, always asking questions and wanting to understand how things worked. Daniel was the wild one, always climbing things he should not and getting into mischief. When Thomas was 10, he asked if he could start running his own trap line. Isaac spent months teaching him, showing him how to read the land and respect the animals they hunted. Beatrice watched them together and felt her heart swell with pride and love. Sarah learned to read from the few books they owned, devouring them over and over until she had them memorized. Isaac made the long journey to Tucson to buy her more books, coming back with an armload that made her shriek with delight. Daniel, as he grew older, showed a talent for working with wood. Isaac taught him to carve, and soon the cabin was filled with the small animals and figures the boy created. They were not a wealthy family by any measure. Their life was simple and sometimes hard. But they were rich in the things that mattered: love, laughter, purpose, belonging. They were a family in every sense of the word. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Beatrice back to the spot where they had first met, where the wagon had broken down all those years ago. They stood together looking out at the vast Arizona landscape, the mountains rising in the distance. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Marrying me and coming to live out here?" She looked at him in genuine surprise. "Never, not once. This life, this family, it is more than I ever dreamed I could have. You saved me, Isaac." "No," he said, pulling her close. "We saved each other." And it was true. They had both been lost in their own ways, both convinced that they were destined to spend their lives alone. But somehow, through chance or fate or divine intervention, they had found each other. And in finding each other, they had found themselves. The children grew up healthy and strong. Thomas married at 22, choosing a sensible girl from Naco named Emma who fit into their family as if she had always been part of it. They built a cabin not far from Isaac and Beatrice's, close enough to help each other but far enough for independence. Within a year, Thomas and Emma had made Beatrice and Isaac grandparents with the birth of their son. Sarah proved too restless for frontier life and eventually moved to Tucson, where she found work as a teacher. She married a lawyer and wrote home regularly, her letters full of life and happiness. She visited when she could, bringing her husband and eventually her own children. Daniel stayed close to home, never quite ready to leave the mountains he loved. He took over more and more of the trapping and hunting as Isaac aged, working alongside his father with quiet competence. Isaac's hair turned gray and then white, and Beatrice found silver threads in her own brown hair. Their hands grew gnarled and weathered, their faces lined with years of sun and wind. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had been that day when he lifted her onto his horse, when she had been hurt and scared and he had been lonely and uncertain. They had been given a gift, they both knew, a second chance that not everyone got. And they had seized it with both hands, building a life together that was everything they needed it to be. On a clear autumn evening, much like the one when Thomas had been born, Beatrice and Isaac sat on the porch of their cabin watching the sun set over the mountains. Their children were grown, their grandchildren thriving, and the world was at peace around them. "I never thought I would be this happy," Beatrice said, her hand in Isaac's. "Neither did I," he admitted. "I thought my life was set, that I would grow old alone in these mountains. And then you came along and changed everything. We changed everything together." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Beatrice Jennings. Every day I wake up grateful that broken wagon wheel brought you into my life. I love you too. You showed me that love had not passed me by at all. It was just beginning." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they sat together in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life full of love and meaning. The mountain man and the woman who thought love had left her behind, proving together that it is never too late for new beginnings, that the heart can heal and hope can return. Their story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but of quiet moments and steady devotion. It was a love story built on honesty and partnership, on shared work and shared dreams. It was the kind of love that lasted because it was rooted in something deeper than passion or romance alone. It was the kind of love that proved, day after day and year after year, that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them, when we have given up looking and are just trying to survive. Sometimes love finds us in the wilderness, in the person of a stranger with kind eyes and gentle hands. And sometimes, just sometimes, broken things can be mended, hearts can heal, and life can offer second chances to those brave enough to take them. The stars came out one by one above the Arizona mountains, and inside the cabin, a fire burned warm and bright, a beacon of home and love and family. And Beatrice and Isaac, hands still clasped, hearts still joined, faced the future together as they had faced the past, with courage and hope and an abiding love that would last them all the rest of their days.